I get that the argument, especially from the GM side, and when you look at declining auto sales, et cetera, is that perhaps this was necessary for GM to do this, to stay ahead of the game, given all the disruptive technologies coming to transportation, et cetera. But doing it coming into the holiday season, with all the focus on trade with G20, is there a better way this could have been handled?
No, this is what, perhaps there's a better way that the White House could have engaged with private industry. But Mary Barra is not a politician. Mary Barra is the CEO of a public company. The President Trump has never had such a role. Other than to his late father, he really hasn't been accountable to anybody. And of course, he's chafing at the bit right now, and the checks and balances in our democratic system about being accountable to courts and sometimes to Congress. But being accountable is what Mary Barra has to do to her shareholders and of course, other stakeholders in the future of the company. So she's making difficult decisions, and she's certainly not trying to antagonize the president. But CEOs who have made independent calls sometimes do get caught in a crossfire. But she doesn't want to go the way of Sears or other troubled companies. She's trying to be upfront on this and make some necessary changes. She doesn't want to be Kodak. You can see, and these are signals that she put out there way back in July. Senators Rob Portman and Senator Sherrod Brown were a part of all this when she warned that Lordstown they wouldn't be able to retrofit. That if it's cost $1,800 more because of these trade frictions, because of steel costs and other costs, it's a little bit harder to produce in North America. But the bigger issue has to do with the dramatic shift, a huge transformation in the way people buy cars, and they're not looking at so much at these passenger vehicles and sedans that I drive, but more the SUVs that my wife and the rest of the world drives, and crossover vehicles. That's where the growth has been, and they have to accommodate that.
Jeff, we've seen a number of companies sort of come under fire and catch the ire of President Trump over the past year plus, whether it's Lockheed Martin and Boeing, whether it's Harley Davidson, Amazon, and of course now GM. In terms of how we've seen those situations play out, is there a tact that CEOs can take or have taken that have proven more successful in terms of being able to execute on their strategies and continue to work well with the White House versus others?
They've tried various strategies. I think it's a great question. Part of the question should also be what the White House needs to learn to better engage the U.S. business community, that it's a two-way street here. The U.S. business community, for the most part, major big company CEOs had great trepidation about the Trump administration. Smaller company CEOs were very excited about the promise. And then as President Trump took over, their skepticism melted away. They were quite excited. And in early 2017, there's a great sense of alignment, enthusiasm about reduction of some regulatory problems, and of course some other issues on immigration, others where they had hopes for. Tax reform was a big one. That dissipated, of course, in the summer of 2017 when he attacked Merck and Ken Frazier of Merck. The business community showed remarkable collective action. For the first time in American history, when the business community quit the president's advisory councils, the first time the U.S. business community refused a call to action from the president, the commander-in-chief. And we've seen that since. Companies like Nike throwing a finger in your eye just 2 months ago with the Travis Kaepernick portrait, of course, in their ad campaigns, and others that the deals done with, I don't know if it was Carrier or Pfizer, and their recent price increases, and Foxconn certainly won't be fully living up to commitments that they've made, or others that have been backing away. We see that some in the business community might think we have a lame duck here. I don't think that's the case, that they should be thinking that way. And some that being bullied is not going to work anymore. The one-offs of playing Pfizer against Merck or Ford against GM doesn't work anymore with these guys.
Jeff, here's the dynamic that I think the dynamic that I think is at play that troubles me is this idea that if you cut taxes for businesses or give them bailouts, somehow you automatically get jobs or you're owed jobs. And we've seen the tax cuts have led to some stock buybacks. You know, dividends have continued to roll. But there's not necessarily this correlation between if you make sure businesses have more money, jobs in the U.S. necessarily materialize. And I kind of draw a line between that idea, in part that the president has advanced, and perhaps this feeling of betrayal toward GM.
We've had that through the history of the last quarter century of either both tax adjustments as well as job training partnership acts. Each time we've seen the money has gone to shareholders, it's gone back for capital reinvestment by the companies, but hasn't necessarily led to more jobs. President Trump, unfortunately, was making commitments as he made in Warren, Ohio. Not a single job will be lost. Well, no plant will be closed, and then we have Lordstown being closed in Michigan. So he was making commitments he couldn't stand by. He didn't see that equation doesn't follow that way, and the business leaders have to make judgment calls as they see them at the time. Harley Davidson repositioning what they had to do. They didn't want to get on a fight with the president on this, but to sell domestically, they manufacture domestically. To sell into Europe now and other places, they had to start to manufacture in Thailand. That cost some jobs in Kansas City, but for Harley and GM, or for the President Trump to be attacking, for that matter, for Amazon and great iconic companies, that's no way to be a champion for private enterprise in this company. Jack Ma of Alibaba doesn't need President Trump to be his chief salesman. And Honda Hero, which is 98% of the world's motorcycles, doesn't need President Trump to be their champion. He should be championing U.S. businesses that are making tough decisions to compete globally, and that's what's happening here. GM has pulled out of India. They've cut back in some very difficult markets around the world. They've shut their Atom Opal business, and they're going through a major restructuring. Mary Barra, I've known one way or another, all 8 of the past General Motors CEOs. 2 or 3 of them I especially admire. Mary's better than all of them. I never knew Alfred Sloan, of course, in the 1920s, but he profoundly reshaped the company, and she's the most exciting CEO we've had since then. But she's not a mudslinger, and the CEOs who don't throw mud back and don't humiliate the president, that's the best way to handle it. Work with facts and not with emotion.